And we are seeing also a presentation. Thank you a lot. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Flavio. So hello, everyone. My name is Gabriel Magalhães, and I will present the work that I developed with Ricardo Costa and Miguel Nóbrega at University of Minho, and the topic coupled approach to solve the flow of viscoelastic fluids. So let's begin with a brief introduction covering the governing equation and the multimode stress tensor. Here, our focus is in the viscoelastic fluids. This is an animation of a real case representing an extrusion process. And the particles are colored by the magnitude of the stress magnitude. So it's possible to observe that in this region, in this initial region, we have a lot of blue particles, meaning that here we have low values for the stress magnitude. But here, sorry. But here in the final part, when the particles are passing for a convergence zone in the geometry, it's possible to observe that we have an increasing in the values of the stress magnitude. This severe increasing in the stress make the calculation more demanding. And this is the scenario for industrial cases. We have a challenge in terms of numerical stability, in terms of the size for the time step, and for the computational cost. So our main goal is to develop and to optimize the methodologies related to viscoelastic fluids to make it possible the simulation of complex geometries with complex viscoelastic fluids, leading to a possibility of apply the fluid extent solver in the analysis of industrial cases. Okay. This is the usual system of equations for an inelastic, incompressible fluid in a laminar isothermal flow. But if we need to consider a viscoelastic fluid in our system, the momentum balance is a little different. We have a new term here, evolving a new variable named tau p. This variable is the polymeric stress tensor. This is a second order tensor, but this tensor is symmetric. So this new variable in the equation requires a new equations in the system. We have to add a constitutive model. The constitutive model is modeled by this equation. And here in the constitutive model, we have a relaxation function. To model the relaxation function, we need to add a viscoelastic law. Here, I'm presenting the form of the Gizicus, extensively used viscoelastic law. But in the fun extent, we have a lot of possibilities of rheological models for viscoelastic fluids. Okay, this is the computational framework for viscoelastic fluids, but there are an additional detail. We need to solve more than one mode for the fluid, and I will explain why we need to represent the fluid by more than one mode. Here we have the experimental data collected in an oscillatory rheometry for a real viscoelastic fluid. We need to fit this data using these two equations. So let's try to use just one mode to fit the equations in the data. Using just one mode, the fit is not good, as can be observed here on the graph on the right. But for this system with just one mode, we have 10 variables, 3 components for the velocity, the pressure, and 6 components for our symmetric tensor. So let's try to use more one mode. Okay. Using 2 modes, the fit is still not good, but the simple addition of one mode to represent our fluid increase the system in 6 variables. So now we have 16 unknowns per cell. The ideal scenario is use 7 modes to fit the results, the data of the experiment. But using 7 modes, we have 46 variables per cell. In real fluids, generally, we have 5 or more modes. It means that we need to solve a minimum of 34 equations, 34 variables per cell. So it's possible to observe that we have a huge problem because we have a lot of variables, and for industrial case, we intend to use huge meshes. So this is the challenge, how to deal with this huge problem in huge meshes with efficient approach. Okay. Here, I will just remember a point that Ricardo Costa presented in the first exaFOAM workshop, that in viscoelastic solvers, it's possible to observe numerical instabilities arising from the decoupling between the velocity and the polymeric stress tensor. So here is the equation of a stabilization model named improved both side diffusion. And here I'm just presenting the multimode formulation. So when we are using more than one mode to represent the fluid, it's possible to observe that we have a summation in the terms of stabilization. Okay, after this brief discussion about the mathematical formulation, let's to present about the coupled approach from the beginning, from the start point. So our start point was the PU coupled form. This solver is native of FOAM extend 5 and was covered in the presentation of Tessa before in this workshop. And it's a solver for laminar and turbulent fluids, laminar and turbulent flows, considering an incompressible fluid and coupling the pressure and velocity. So basically, we are inserting the terms of the equations and the corresponding colors in the matrix and the white terms in the RHS. We have one matrix similar to this for each computational cell. So from this solver, we derived our semi-coupled solver for viscoelastic fluids. To implement the semi-coupled solver, we used this mathematical formulation. And here on the right, it's possible to observe, it's shown, the flow chart for the solver. So basically, we have some modifications in the momentum equation here in the red portion of the equation and in the RHS. And we have a new step in our flow chart after the solution of the block system. And in this step, we are solving the constitutive equation for each mode. It means that, for example, if we are using a fluid with 5 modes, we are solving 30 equations in this step. Okay. Our main goal was to develop a fully coupled approach to simulate real cases. And when we are talking about real cases, we need to use multi-mode fluids. Generally, the real fluids are represented by multi-mode. And if we consider all the modes coupled in the block matrix, we will have a huge structure with 40, for example, if we are considering 5 modes, we will have a 34 per 34 matrix in each computational cell. So it's expensive in terms of memory, in terms of computational cost. So our proposal is to divide this term in 2 parts, and we will treat just one mode implicitly and the other modes explicitly. So we have this equation for the momentum coupling the polymeric stress tensor, one mode of the polymeric stress tensor, in the velocity. To couple the velocity in the polymeric stress tensor, we have chosen this term, and we applied a Taylor approximation. When we apply a Taylor approximation, basically we are dividing this term in 3 parcels, an implicit, an explicit, and a cross-coupling parcel. And in the convergence, the implicit and the explicit will cancel, and the term is modeled by the cross-coupling. So we have this equation for the constitutive model with this term divided in 3 parcels. So with this treatment, we have the proposal for our viscoelastic fully coupled solver. Here again, we have on the right the flow chart for the solver and the mathematical formulation on the left. It's possible to observe that we have a new line, a new row, and a new column for the block system. And here again, we will insert the terms of the equation in the corresponding colors in the matrix, and the white terms in the RHS. The zero portions mean that we have no coupling between pressure and the polymeric stress tensor. But here, the solution of the polymeric stress tensor is divided. The first part is in the step 4, where the coupled mode is assembled and inserted in the equation, and the other modes are solved in step 9. So here we are solving the number of modes minus 1. Okay, after present the coupled approach, let's discuss briefly some implementations that were necessary for the solvers, for the semi-coupled and fully coupled solver. The main point of our implementation was in the viscoelastic class, because in the form that this class was implemented in the FOAM Extend 5, we had some difficulty to generalize the class for all the solvers. So we implemented a refactored version for the viscoelastic class, and here I'm showing the scheme for the motor class, the viscoelastic model, and a sun class viscoelastic law, and just a title of example, the Giese-Kuss rheological model, but all the models in the list in the beginning of our presentation were compatibilized for this structure that I'm presenting. So here I'm highlighting in green the new member functions that we implemented in the Viscoelastic class and the new variables that we are using. I will discuss briefly some modifications that we implemented. The first is that in the previous version, the constitutive equation was solved inside the correct member function. And it's not good in terms of generalization. So we implemented a new member function that returns just the constitutive equation without solve this. And the solution of the equation is promoted inside the main solver. So now we have a new member function named tau eqn, returning just the equation of tau. It's important to mention that it's just implemented for the real logical models which solve directly the tau tensor, because we have some models that are obtaining tau for other tensors, and for those models obtaining tau, the structure of correct is exactly the same of the previous version. Another important modification was in the gvtau function, that we're returning the term that we insert in the momentum equation. In the previous version, we had one implementation of this function for each real logical model, but now we have just one implementation in this sum class. And the stabilization model is applied directly here. It was implemented as an enumerated list. So now it's possible to choose between the BSD, the IBSD, or the no applied stabilization model. We are retrieving some properties if it's necessary. Now it's possible to get both the reference for the tau. It's important, for example, for the fully coupled solver. And we have other modifications in the class in this new structure that we implemented. But now let's check the results for an application case. The application case here is the micro benchmark 19 of exaFOAM, the profile extrusion case. It consists in a simple geometry for an extrusion process. We have symmetry planes here in this geometry. And our fluid is modeled by 6 modes using Giesecke's. And an interesting characteristic about this real fluid used in the benchmark is that any mode have solvent viscosity. It's more challenging in terms of numerical stability. So it's a good case to check the stability of our solver. For this case, we have 40 unknowns per computational cell, 3 velocity components, the pressure, and 6 stress components for each one of the 6 modes. And before to present the results, it's important to talk about the memory requirement for each solver. So just remembering the number of coupled variables. For the segregated solver, we have no coupled variables. For the semi-coupled solver, we have 4 coupled variables. And for the fully coupled solver, we have 10 variables coupled. Here it's a simple, we have a simple analysis of this case in the mesh with 1 million cells. And it's possible to observe here that the memory requirement for the semi-coupled solver is 1.6 times higher than the memory required for the segregated. And for the fully coupled, the memory requirement is 4.7 times higher. It's important to keep it in mind because for huge cases using a lot of modes or a huge mesh, the memory requirement could be a limitation of the use of the fully coupled solver. So here we have the mesh for the microbenchmark 19. And in the right, I'm presenting the geometry to discuss an important thing. Since it's not possible to compare the residual for different formulations, coupled and segregated, we decided to use the convergence controlled by relevant outcomes for the practical applications. For this case, we are considering the pressure at the inlet pad here, and the flux distribution in the outlet here. So to control the flux distribution, we divided the outlet pad in 3 zones, and we are analyzing the flux in each of those zones. Here we have in this table the results using a tolerance of 1% for the variation to determine the convergence. In each row, I'm highlighting the property that determines the convergence. So this is the execution time to reach the convergence in each of the properties that we are analyzing. We run these simulations using different values of Courant number, and the best result for all the solvers is observed using a Courant number of 5. So let's to analyze better these results in a graph. Here we have the results for each approach using a Courant number of 5. And it's in the left, we have the pressure at inlet, the relative difference for the pressure in the inlet. And in the right, the flux in the zone 3, also the relative difference. So the semi-coupled solver is the first to reach the convergence, and the convergence is determined by the flux in the zone 3. After, it's possible to observe the convergence for the segregated solver, and last for the fully coupled solver. All the convergence for all the solvers is determined by the relative difference for the flux in the zone 3. Okay, so observing these results, it's possible to conclude that the semi-coupled solver is 62% faster than the segregated solver using the same Courant number, but the fully coupled solver is 44% is lower than the segregated using the same Courant number. The result of the semi-coupled solver is good, and calculating the KPI of time to solution, we have a value of 1.61. It's basically our reference is the segregated, and with the semi-coupled, we have a better performance. So just to finalize the conclusions about our work, viscoelastic industrial cases are very challenging and demanding. So our main goal was to reduce the calculation time to make possible the use of the phone extend viscoelastic solver in industrial cases, in real case. For this, we implemented a refactored version for the viscoelastic class, a multimode coupled rheological model, and the semi-coupled and fully coupled viscoelastic solvers. With these implementations, the results are that we observed a memory requirement 1.6 times higher for the semi-coupled solver compared with the segregated, and 4.7 times higher for the fully coupled solver compared with the segregated. For the semi-coupled solver, we observed results 62% faster than the segregated for the micro benchmark 90 of exaFOAM, but for the fully coupled solver, we observed a result 44% is lower than the segregated for the same micro benchmark. And the result of the KPI time to solution, considering the time of the semi-coupled solver, is 1.61. So these are good results, but we still validating the solvers using the other benchmark cases of the exaFOAM for the viscoelastic solvers. Okay. So thank you very much. And if you have questions,